It's the voice of DJ Screen right here. This is the new 105.3 The Beat. We have a special guest in the building today. He is the district attorney for Fulton County right here in Georgia. He's Paul Howard is here with me today. How you doing, man? Good morning.
Hey, man, I'm doing great. Glad to be here. Glad to be here to get a chance to speak with you and talk to the community.
Yes, absolutely. We have so many topics, man, but let's just start off by talking about you're the DA, you're the district attorney. What is your role? What are your duties so people can be clear on what you do?
Well, what the district attorney does in Fulton County is to handle the prosecution of felony offenses.
Okay.
And I point that out because sometimes in other district attorneys' offices, they also handle misdemeanors. But in Fulton County, we only handle felony cases. And so that stems all the way from a theft by taking that might be a felony to a murder case in which the death penalty might be possible. It is an office where we receive approximately 10,000 felonies a year because we receive them from all of the 13 jurisdictions in Fulton County. I have an office of 238 employees. 109 of those employees are lawyers, and we've got a budget of approximately $24 million. We annually now prosecute about 8,000 cases that are actually indicted in our office.
Absolutely. And you're seeking your seventh term?
This would be my seventh term as district attorney.
Okay. So is it everything you dreamed it would be when you were elected in 1996? Like, did you see yourself making it to a seventh term when you went into the first term?
Well, I never really thought about it when I started, how long I would stay. I really thought about it in terms of getting things done. I guess I had three things in mind when I started. I've often told people about my first experiences with the criminal justice system starting in a South Georgia courtroom. I was only about 14 then. One of my teachers took a class to a courtroom. We had never been to a courtroom, and when we got there, we were put in a special place. We were so naive, we thought we were in the special place because we were special. We didn't realize it was because we were African American.
Right.
But on the day that we were there, we saw a trial involving two African American men who had been charged with aggravated assault. And the supposed victim in the case was the owner of the farm that they worked on. They were sharecroppers. And so he actually said to the jury, it was an all-white jury, he said, if my gun had not stuck that day, these two N-words wouldn't be here.
Oh, wow.
And so
And that happened right here?
No, it happened in Burke County, Georgia.
In Burke County, okay.
And so I was shocked. My classmates were shocked because we didn't realize that you could say things like that in court. But even though I was young, I said to myself, I wanted to do something to make sure that no other person was humiliated. And you could tell those two guys were humiliated by what went on. And I thought the best way to do that would be to serve as a prosecutor. So when I was elected, I thought that I had fulfilled my first thought about being a prosecutor is to try to set up a process so that African Americans would be treated fairly in court. The second thing that I wanted to do, my mentor and person I had worked for was Maynard Jackson. And for some reason, when I started working for the city as a prosecutor, he would direct me, he would call me Mr. DA. And I would ask him, like, why are you calling me Mr. DA? And he would say, look, you got to do some things, man. He said, when you get to be DA, first thing you got to work on is, he says, man, there are 15 to 20 black men who get killed by the police every year. He said the DA can change that. Now, I have to tell you, I didn't have Maynard Jackson's political sophistication.
Right.
I mean, this guy was thinking way in advance, but he said that if you became the DA, you can change, because he said he believed that the police did what the DA allowed them to do. And he said, so you have to be the kind of DA that would not allow them to shoot black men. The third thing that he said to me is, hey, we need better judges in our community, you know, whether they be white judges or black judges. And he says, I think most of those judges would come through the DA's office. So he says, you need to be there so you can help our community achieve more justice by having better judges.
Right.
And so when I was elected, those are the things that I set out to do. And so I never thought about them in terms of a term or how many terms. I just wanted to see those things happen for our community.
Absolutely. Now, one topic in the community locally right here in Atlanta, and me just talking to common people, is just the relationships with the police department. Let me start by asking you, if you're African American, if you're any human for that matter, and you get pulled over by the police, what should you do? Yeah. Because a lot of people, the first thing that's going to happen is their heart is going to speed up. They're going to be in fear because of all the things that are happening. But what would you say, Paul Howard, to the people, if you're getting pulled over by the police, how should you go about the process?
Yeah. Let me say something, and I know it probably will be controversial with some people, but today, as I sit here, we got to change. We've got to change something that's going on. If you might give me a chance to explain what I mean by that.
Please.
Well, after Rayshard Brooks was killed, on the Sunday following, I went home, and I've got a son that's 25 years old. And so I'm talking to my son about the shooting, and my son says to me, he says, Daddy, do you think the police are going to bother me? And I said, well, no. I said, that happened over at the Wendy's over on University. And my son said to me, Daddy, did you know that I bought food from that Wendy's?
We all have, me included.
And I said to my son, wait a minute, there's a Wendy's right down the street.
Right.
But he said, Daddy, that Wendy's stays open late.
Yes.
And he said, so I've been over there many times. He said, in fact, I was over there last week. And it struck me that, wait a minute, that could have been my own son.
Right.
And in fact, as you said, it could have been any one of us. Anyone. And I said to myself, isn't this a crazy way to live? That we have to now, I'm explaining to my 25-year-old son that he has to conduct himself in a certain way. Right. And so I understand, because I'm a parent, because you want your kids to come home safely. And I would say to people, you got to follow the police instruction. Right. And but George Floyd, he followed the police instruction. He did. And he ended up dead. He did. So the thing that I would say today is, and if you're really serious about that question, is we got to change. We got to change. Because it is a crazy thing. And this is what's really crazy about it.
But with the holiday weekend coming out and you're out and trying to enjoy, and, with everything else going on in the world, I've said, if your son, so what did you tell your son to do if he's pulled over by a police officer?
And this is what I have to say. Hey, man, don't make any sudden moves. Put your hands on the steering wheel, be polite, and get home alive. Would you advise people to maybe start their phones, start recording immediately? Would you advise anything of that nature? The way things are going today, what I would probably do is to say, hey, Mr. Officer, I just want you to know this is a telephone and I'm recording. Right. Because
we saw something similar with Philando Castile.
Absolutely. And see what happened to him. Yeah. We tried it every way. We've tried it peacefully. We've been compliant. And then you get to someone like Rayshard Brooks. I guess he said, man, let me just run. Maybe I can save my life by running. Right. People have said, hey, maybe if you just would do something that was not very combative, like jogging down the street. And I know you jog, but that's what happened to Mr. Arbery. He was just jogging down the street. Yeah. And the other thing that people have said to us, well, maybe if you just stay home. Maybe if you just stay in your house.
Breonna Taylor.
And Miss Taylor was in her house, minding her own business, man. Yeah. And she ended up getting shot 8 times. So what we've got to do, if those things really bother you, I think what we've got to say is, we got to change. We can't keep living like this.
And changes come from election and exercising your right to vote, correct?
Absolutely.
Another complaint from the community. Sometimes people rally behind and they elect officials people say anything, obviously, to get in office. Then they're in office, then nothing happens. So what would you say to people who have that type of energy towards voting, saying that's a waste of time because we voted this, and this person in, and they were supposed to change this, and this, or help our school systems, and it didn't happen? How do we speak to those people, and what information do we give them?
Well, listen, I'm going to tell you, I think that is really critical. That's really critical. It's really critical in this race for district attorney. Because when I started as district attorney, the conversation then in our community was all of the homicides that we were having in the city of Atlanta.
Right.
We were having like 187 homicides a year.
And not police homicides, just
homicides in general. Man,
Right.
people were in panic. They referred to some of our neighborhoods as Little Vietnam. We were known as the murder capital of the South. When I ran for DA, what I said was, I will take some steps to reduce the violence in our community.
Right.
When people said to me, you can't do that, it's just going to get worse. And that was in 1996 when I was elected. Since I've been in office, the violent crime rate in the city of Atlanta has dropped by 70%. By 70%. And some people say, well, that just happens over a period of time.
Right.
In DeKalb County, during the same period of time, the number of homicides has gone up by 78%. So it's not just being there. You've got to take actions to do it. So I point that out, that when you elect someone, you ought to have somebody who can show you that they will do what they promised. One of the other big things when I was elected is we had 4,800 people in the Fulton County Jail. And I believe it's a jail that was only built for like 2,400 people.
Oh, wow.
So we had folks sleeping on the floor. When I said folks, they were black folks, generally black men, sleeping on the floor of the jail. And I said, we can do something about that. We can change that. And, people said, no, the number of people in jail is just a product of the crime. I said, that's really not true. So we put something together in my office called a complaint room. It's a receiving and booking procedure. I work with Mayor Shirley Franklin. We got that complaint room system aligned with the city of Atlanta. And rather than having 4,800 people in the jail, now we've got less than 2,400. We've saved taxpayers more than $50 million a year. So what I say to people is, if you vote for the right person, that there are people who will get in office and make a change. And that's why I'm asking them to consider this election, because there's a thing that we have got to do. We've got to do it in our community. I have done it before, and I want to do this for our community and our country, because we need to make Rayshard Brooks the last one. We need to make him the last one.
I agree. What are your thoughts on someone like Rayshard Brooks and other people, obviously, who have been sentenced? What are your thoughts on prisoner reform? Because people do make mistakes.
That's right.
And people do have to go, they're sentenced and they do their jail time. But, where's the light at the end of the tunnel for the people who have made mistakes and come out and say, I want to do better? Because like Rayshard Brooks was saying, I'm sure you saw the interview that went around online, you come out and you're looking at that job application and in your heart you're a changed person, but it says, have you ever been convicted of a felony? And when you check yes, the odds are you're not probably going to be employed by that particular entity. So what are your thoughts on just prison reform and after you make that mistake and after you're now out in the world and moving forward?
Right. Well, let me tell you the several things that I believe should happen. About 2005, my office started operating an expungement unit in the DA's office. Okay. So when somebody would come in to get their records expunged, we would assist them in getting the record expunged. One of the reasons we started it is because I noticed that we had people in our community, they were charging people $300 to get their records expunged. Wow. But all they were doing was bringing the record to our office and making $300. Right. So we started doing it ourselves. But one of the things that we noticed shortly after that is that the people who were asking for the expungements were people who were trying to get a job. And so we've been focused on trying to do something to change this whole equation, because in Georgia, you can only get your record expunged if it is an arrest But if it is a conviction, the chances are there's very little opportunity to get expunged.
Right.
So for the past 3 years, we have been in the DA's office. I have been trying to get a bill passed to allow folks who were convicted of nonviolent felonies and misdemeanors, if you didn't have an arrest in 5 years, you could get that record expunged and get the record sealed. That's what I believe. I do not believe that somebody should suffer for their entire lives just because they make a minor mistake. Well, I'm happy to announce that on this week, at least a version of that bill passed unanimously. Okay. It's House Bill 288. We've been trying to do this for 3 years, and we hope that the governor will sign it so that people can, with these small crimes, they can get it off their records. And our data shows that there are probably like 100,000 people in our county who might be affected if this bill passes. If you got a record, it is difficult to get a job. We looked at the states already who passed that same law, and there are 38 of them. Every time the law passed, two things happened. The unemployment rate dropped by an average of 2%. The other thing that happened is the crime rate also dropped as well. So you can see there's a definite relationship between being a job, holding a job, and committing crimes.
Now let's talk about the facts that you explored led to charging the officers in the Rayshard Brooks case. So let's talk about the facts. We know that Rayshard Brooks is an African-American brother who was intoxicated, went to the Wendy's to get a bite to eat, fell asleep in his car. We know that someone called the police. We know that the police arrived. We know from seeing the videotape that there was a long narrative between them, upward of, I think, 40 to 50 minutes. We know that I think one key part of it is when you're arrested, you should be read your rights, right?
Right.
Someone should read you your rights and place you under arrest. It came to a moment where the officer, I think he made the comment, I think you've had too much to drink to operate the vehicle, which is not the proper way to read someone their rights, correct?
That's correct.
We know that after that, resistance happened between Mr. Brooks and the officers. And we saw the rest. Everyone saw the rest up to the point of him, reaching for the tasers, running, being shot down. We didn't see anything past that. We know that you guys have access to other footage that will probably be significant during the trial. And you charged the officers, rather expeditiously.
Right.
Now with that, we also have to have the real conversations. There's been a lot of backlash from certain people. Right. He did it because it's politically motivated. He did it because, he's up for his 7th term. I guess speak to Fulton County, speak to even the neighboring counties. You know what I'm saying? If people feel like charging the officers may have been premature, what would you say to those people?
Well, I would say they're wrong.
Okay.
I would say let's look at the record of Paul Howard with respect to charging officers. I think people would be exactly correct if this was the first time we charged someone.
Correct.
I think they would be precisely correct if this was the first time that we've charged someone.
And to have a brief interjection, in 2002, the police killed a 19-year-old black man, and that officer was charged as well, correct?
Absolutely.
And that was in 2002, just for information for people, right?
So, in fact, we have been involved in 40 cases involving police officers. 9 of those cases, they've involved deaths where the policeman actually caused the death.
Right.
And the first one of those cases was the Corey Ward case that happened in 2002. People remember Katherine Johnston. We tried just 3 years ago, for the first time in the whole history of the country, we convicted 2 East Point police officers for killing someone with a taser. They fired upon this brother 14 times, and that officer was convicted of felony murder. So we have done this before. We've got a special unit in our office that's made up of investigators, of lawyers and administrators, and that's what they do as part of their regular duties. It's not some special duty. This is what they do on a regular basis. The other thing that's important, is these officers were charged with, they were asked, or we asked for an arrest warrant prior to indictment.
Right.
This marks the fourth time we've done this. We did it with the Atlanta case involving an officer by the name of James Burns.
Okay.
And I believe Mr. Burns is responsible for killing Kane Rogers. He was dismissed or fired by the city. And about 7 days afterwards, we brought charges against James Burns. And again, when we did it, the claim at that time that it was a politically motivated charge. So when in every one of the cases that we've charged police officers, the claim has always been that it was political. So for people who say that that's the reason we did it, I say that's not true. Simply look at our record of charging people in the past.
Right. Now, I got to be honest with you. I think that, we want the cops that murdered Breonna Taylor arrested and charged. We're happy with how everything went with the Rayshard Brooks case, because I personally, after reviewing it, don't feel like the brother deserved to die. We looked at the Ahmaud Arbery case, and these people have been charged, but there's some things going around on social media where there's different squares. It's like charged, then there's trial, then there's sentenced. Do you think that this recent stream of cases, it will stick? Because there's been officers charged before and it didn't stick. Do you think that it will stick? Because if they don't stick, and this is a message just from the community, there'll be more civil unrest because people want justice. A charge is a step towards justice, right? But people want justice. They want, if a human being kills another human being, justice should be served. So in your personal opinion, do you think that in this personal case and in the other cases, there's enough evidence for these charges to stick?
Yes.
Okay.
I think there's enough evidence. But I think also that we in our community, we've got to work to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And let me tell you, one of the things that we can do is that we can change the process regarding how cases get to a trial jury. Because right now, even though these officers in the Rayshard Brooks case were charged, we have to present those cases to a grand jury.
Right.
Well, police officers have got some real advantages in Georgia with respect to grand juries.
And that is qualified?
Well, no, this is what goes on in the grand jury. The policemen get a chance to appear before the grand jury. So after the state makes its presentation, the officers get a chance to come in and make a statement. Now, for instance, if you were charged with a crime, a murder, any kind of crime, you don't get a chance to come in before the grand jury.
I didn't know that.
The police officers get a chance to come in. So when they come in, that means that they can say anything that they want. We don't have any control. We can't determine the nature of that testimony.
Right.
We can't determine how long the police officers speak. People are kind of outraged as we talk about it because during the grand jury proceedings, we, the state, we have to advise the grand jury of the officers' defenses. We're required to do that by law. We have to let the police know 20 days in advance that they're being presented before the grand jury. And on the other hand, if that was you don't get any notice.
Wow.
We don't have to explain to a jury your defenses. So the police officers, there's a great advantage for them in the grand jury proceeding. So that's a big hurdle that we have to get by. So that's why I am proposing that we ought to change the law. I think the law should be changed that if this incident, if the crime involves an allegation of a police killing a citizen, the DA should be able to indict that case without going to a grand jury.
Wow.
The DA should be able to just sign it, and it should go to a trial jury. Well, people say to me, well, you can't give the DA that kind of power. Well, the DA has the power to decide to ask for the death penalty for someone.
Right.
If it was you, so why couldn't the DA just decide that a case go before the before a trial jury?
Right.
Also, what people don't realize is about 40% of the cases that are presented to juries are presented by accusation it allows the DA to just sign the document and the case gets presented to a trial jury. So this is not something new. I'm simply suggesting that it ought to be expanded to cover these incidents involving police officers. If that happened, that would eliminate a really big hurdle because, as you talked about, people expect justice. And I think people would be really disappointed that you could charge somebody, then it goes before a grand jury. And
there's a lot of charges there. We're not, completely acquitted would be, and it would have to cause some civil unrest because to say that they're completely acquitted of all charges would just be almost a spit in the face.
Right. And I think that the officers deserve the same right as every other citizen. I believe there ought to be one standard of justice. Shouldn't be one standard for the police and one standard for everybody else. All of us ought to operate on the same standard. And that's a change that I think that we need to make in this country. I have noticed that many of my colleagues, and I'm not blaming any DA, but I hear it all the time. Well, I would have charged the officer, but I was afraid the grand jury wouldn't indict him. Or they go before grand juries. We know it from the Michael Brown case. That's what the DA said. I took it to the grand jury. The grand jury didn't return an indictment. Shamir Rice in Cleveland. The DA said.
Elijah McClain as well.
Absolutely.
The DA in Colorado. He said, I can't, without a credit of a doubt, or however he worded it, I can't say without a doubt that they murdered him, so I didn't indict.
And so I think what this also does, it kind of it gives the community a clear demarcation between a DA who will not take reasonable actions and someone who won't do it. And if they had the right to just charge it themselves, then they couldn't offer the excuse of having a grand jury.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, the Rayshard Brooks case and the officers being charged obviously led to some police officers maybe not agreeing with your decision to charge those fellow police officers. And there's been conversations about the blue flu going on and a lot of officers calling out and so forth. And obviously that puts you in an interesting place because you still have to work with law enforcement because we still want to have law enforcement to, control and patrol our streets. And I imagine that it's a difficult place for the mayor as well. Have you had a chance to talk to officers on the force since making those charges or have any interaction with the police chief just to kind of let them know where you're coming from and why you did what you did?
Yeah, well, I want people to understand that we've been going through this since 2002. This is not nothing
So we've
new.
had officers call out before because of...
Let me just tell you, man, people don't realize that since 2002, we have had situations where the police department has come by and ticketed every vehicle in the DA's office.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
We've had situations where the police have towed away every vehicle that the DA's office operates.
This is info.
And let me tell you something. And I've told the police, I've said to the police chief, you can do whatever you want to the cars. We're going to continue to do the same thing because what we're doing is right. So this tension is nothing new. We've been dealing with it for a long time. But the reason that things continue is that so many of the police officers are sick of the same things. It's very interesting. Chief Wakocha, who's here with me today, when we arrived at the Rayshard Brooks funeral, as soon as we got there, we had an officer, an Atlanta police officer, who said, hey, let me give you some directions back here, just back in here, Mr. Howard. And he guided us in, and we parked, and he comes around to the window, and he says, sir, I just want to thank you for what you did. That's from a police officer. So that this whole exercise about people walking off, which I think was engineered by the police union, is really done to kind of punish the community for doing the right thing. And I wouldn't buy it. I wouldn't, if I was a citizen, I wouldn't be worried about it because there are police officers who really do value their service. And let me tell you something, they aren't going anywhere. In fact, what they're asking us to do is please help me figure out a way to get from under the influence of these police union tactics.
Absolutely, absolutely. Are there any final words you want to say to the community right here in Atlanta and everyone listening and watching as we move into the rest of 2020, which has been a very trying year for all of us? But what do you want to say to the people of Atlanta and the community?
Well, what I want to say to them, and I know people are making a tough decision, about voting, but I just think the decision ought to be real clear. You got to put someone in office for the district attorney's office who, number one, is going to be independent. We can't have a district attorney who has been funded by the police union.
Wow.
And funded by Republicans. We've got Doug Collins from the 9th Congressional District here in our community. I mean, it's just crazy that, and you got to ask yourself, why would Trump Republicans get involved in the DA's race? What is it that they want? I don't think it's something for our best interest,
right.
Whatever it is they want.
Right.
But I think that I want people to understand that because of the many things that have happened, because of what we've done in the past, that I am dedicating these next 4 years in office to making sure that Rayshard Brooks is the last one. We've done it before, and I've mentioned some of the things we've done in our office when people said you can't do it. I believe we can do it, particularly if we work together.
Right.
But I think we owe it to our children, we owe it to ourselves to quit talking about it.
Right.
But we've got to make him the last one.
Yeah. And what do you think is the stall with police training? Like, has there been progress in police training?
Well,
at least locally, because if you say 2002 and we're 2020, that's 18 years. Like, has there ever been anything on the table to say, like, this is the way you should attack these situations and you shouldn't just murder people or even abuse people?
See, I think the thing that we have to understand is it's not the training, it's the culture. If you don't change the culture,
right,
I think the training has much less importance.
Got you.
And what we have not done in many respects is face the facts. We haven't looked at the fact, clearly. Usually what people will say, well, if a police officer does something, this was just a few bad apples.
Right.
Well, but it keeps on happening over and over again. And that's a product of a culture. We have got to change the culture. Once we change the culture would demand some common sense things. Like, for instance, when you look at that Rayshard Brooks video, you're probably thinking now, why don't they just let this dude go home? I mean, he wasn't harming anybody. In fact, he suggested to them,
I can go home.
I'm going right
close.
across the street.
Right,
Here's
right.
my car. You got my driver's license.
Yeah.
And most people is like saying, yeah, why didn't you do that? But it's the culture that demands that something else happen. We change the culture, and then we can change. And this is the thing that I believe that the people that are continue to protest in our community, what they're saying is that, Mr. Howard, if you don't understand the culture, then you don't understand how this permeates our entire criminal justice system. You can't be good at one part, but ignore this thing that's going on. And I think that's what we have to do. I think that is something that I can do, working with our community, because we've got to change that culture.
Absolutely. Paul Howard, I appreciate your time today. Well wishes to you on seeking your 7th term. And you're welcome here anytime. If there's anything you need to address, if you need to talk to the people, talk to the community,
well, listen,
talk to the streets.
I would very much like to come back. And one of the things that I'd like to come back and talk about is some of the recommendations for permanent change. And I would really like to have a dialogue with the community about some of the things that we need to change. We really need to talk a lot about body cam video, dash cam videos. We need to talk about sovereign immunity and qualified immunity. Those are some things that we need to demand in the next change of office in the White House. We need to stop asking. We need to demand them.
Demand them. Hold the elected officials accountable
Yes,
for
sir.
what they promised the people, because that's the
Absolutely.
biggest concern. People are like, we can go vote and put them in, but are they going to do what they say they're going to do?
And I want to know now is, are you going to do it on the first day you get there?
Right. Are you going to start from day one?
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right.
All right. Salute to Paul Howard for pulling up to DJ Scream. 105.3 The Beat.